Well, it's the big one. Ireland face England in Twickenham this weekend in round 4 of the Six Nations. You're all very welcome to The Takeaway, sponsored by Chicago Town, sponsors of all our Six Nations coverage here on Balls.ie. Be sure to get your Chicago Town pizza before the big game this weekend. My name is Máire Treasa and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by Gordon Darcy. Gordon, I hope you're well this week.
Yeah, very good. How are you keeping?
Good. I'm nervous but excited about the weekend, and I'm delighted to be joined this week as well, very shortly, by former England out half and host of the Rugby Pod to give the view of our neighbours, our lovely neighbours from across the pond later on, Andy Goode. But firstly, Gordon, if we look back quickly to the game against the Italians 2 weekends ago, we won't go into it too much. As expected, it was a very comfortable win for Ireland. But did Ireland learn anything from that performance, apart from a really confusing rule in the rugby rulebook?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth there. Very little learned other than England, Italy, going backwards with regards to what they're putting out into the Six Nations. From what Andy Farrell would have understood, his playmakers, his game breakers had good games, and unfortunately, the guys who would have liked a sterner test to maybe put their hat in the ring just didn't get it. Like guys like Joey Carberry, Robbie Henshaw, just didn't have an opportunity, and players like Caelan Doris, Gibson Park. They just did, and Tyg Byrne, their class kind of came to the top, and they just I suppose cemented themselves and how important they are to the team, and probably why Caelan Doris is starting at 8. He was so influential in that game.
I suppose one thing that was clear from that game is that Johnny Sexton is still clearly number one, and he signed on until the end of the World Cup, the end of 2023. Good bit of business for Ireland. Will he still be our main man next year?
Listen, it's necessity. He is going to go to the World Cup. Will he be the first choice? But it doesn't matter. He gives you that. He gives you that certainty that he is there. I think I think we've talked about this already. Is that Joey Carberry? It's not a gap in skills. It's a gap in experience. But Ireland is not England. It's not France. We can't just throw away Six Nations. We need to win nearly every game we play. So it's a very, very hard balancing act for any coach to, get players that need game time while still winning. You look what France did 2 years ago, and arguably what Eddie Jones is doing in this Six Nations. Ireland picked their strongest team almost week in, week out. But listen, the long term and the short term, it's great having Johnny Sexton there. He is he's the Tom Brady of Irish rugby. His years, just rolling back the years, keeps going, I think the important thing is he keeps delivering at the elite level. So there's physical attributes he doesn't have that he had 10 years ago, but his game, his ability to manage games is still there. So as long as he got that, it's a good bit of business.
And a fascinating battle this weekend between himself and Marcus Smith, which we'll chat about later on. But selection-wise, ahead of this weekend, Farrell has made 6 changes. No real shocks, I suppose. Peter O'Mahony gets the nod, as does James Lowe. What are your overriding thoughts on this team?
I've a couple of friends from in a WhatsApp group. A couple of potholes, and one of the guys is a very, very staunch Munster man, Shane Kelly, and he was just he's delighted with the selection of Peter O'Mahony, and we were kind of over and backing a little bit, and it reminds me of that back row. The way Doris is playing is almost like the way Jamie Heaslip was playing when he had kind of Stephen Ferris and David O'Mahony either side of him. There seems to be a lovely balance in that. Doris seems to be really settled as an 8, and it is his best position, I think. And Peter O'Mahony comes in, and I think he adds an awful lot. He has this terrible reputation of being a real unseen or a player's player. But I suppose what that means is it allows players like Caelan Doris and Josh Van der Fleer to shine, and he kind of does that hard work that terrible phrase, he'd put his head where most people wouldn't put their boot. So I think he adds a different type of balance to the back row, and one we will probably need. James Lowe, listen, he has plenty of credit in the bank, and Andy had noticed as well. There's this weird thing in international rugby. You carry form regardless of your club form from international in the autumn series into the Six series. So if you played really, really well in the November series, that's still in the coach's mind. And I think James Lowe, there's an awful lot that he brought in that November series, which was hugely profitable for Ireland. and they're going to need that. They're going to need his attributes again against the English. So I think it was fairly safe enough selections across the board.
Was anyone unlucky to miss out on selection on the basis of, or on the back of, their performance in the Italian game?
I don't really think so. I think the tight five kind of picked itself. Ian Henderson being out kind of put him a little bit behind the pecking order. Obviously Peter O'Mahony played well, so that kind of put him in the front foot, and in the back line, Robbie Henshaw was the only one. You maybe Lowry, but I think your first start, you're probably not going to displace the incumbent, and Henshaw, the game just never fell for him, so he couldn't show what he did. But he's in the 23, and he'll offer a huge amount of experience off the bench.
Well, to give us an insight now in what might lie ahead this weekend in Twickenham, I'm delighted that we're joined now by Andy Goode. Andy, you're joining us from up the road in Belfast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Had a decent night out in Dublin last night. We're headed up to Belfast today. So, just mixing around with the Irish before everyone heads over to Twickenham on Saturday.
I was going to introduce you two, but I'm going to bring up a picture now. You've already been acquainted years ago. Was this a high tackle, Gordon?
Well, to be honest, I think that's a fairly standard tackle. I'm surprised there's as much contact in that, because Andy had a little bit of a reputation as the revolving door.
Any standout moments from playing against Gordon, Andy, or playing against Ireland in general?
Well, that picture there, Gordon obviously stepped me on the inside, and I'd just flung an arm out. In this day and age, that's a yellow card. In that day and age, it was a missed tackle and play on, I think. So, listen, I've had some great memories playing against Ireland. I say great memories only personally because I don't think I ever beat Ireland when I played for England. But I do remember that very game, Gordon, 2006. It was when Shane Horgan scored the try in the corner right at the death to win it for you guys, which gave you the Triple Crown as well. But that was immaterial to me because I'd kicked a penalty about 5 minutes before the final whistle to put England ahead. I think we were ahead 24-21, something like that. And Brian Moore was the commentator, and over the stadium tannoy, they announced me as man of the match. And it's the one and only time I've ever got a man of the match at international level. And so the next 5 minutes, I didn't care what happened because I was just celebrating myself on the field. And I think Shane Horgan scored in the corner, and I was jumping around, and I've got man of the match. It doesn't matter. So it was obviously very disappointing to lose that game, but it's my only time I've won man of the match in international level against Ireland, and we still lost. So. Not only did I win that, but I got stepped and rinsed by Gordon during the game as well. So there we go.
Yeah, I think that was around the time when we were both really enjoying the pointless glove phase.
What was the thinking behind those gloves?
I got paid to wear them, I suppose. That's the only real thinking. It started off as a bit of a gimmick around, help you catch and pass, and I didn't pass it very much anyway. I just kicked it. So it was definitely a gimmick for me to wear them, but a paid gimmick, I suppose. So not always lost.
Twickenham wasn't the happiest of hunting grounds for Ireland during your playing days, Gordon. What is it about Twickenham that makes it such a difficult place to go and win? It hasn't been the worst place for me. I've won 3 out of the last 4 times we've won there. I played in 3 of them, so it's been reasonably okay. I suppose when I was looking back over the games, it's the thing is, even when we win and we play well, and it's always tooth and nail stuff. Like 2006, we have to score when I mean off the cuff, O'Gara was like pulling stuff out of his to try and chip over the defensive line from a midfield scrum. Like, you couldn't make that stuff up.
Yeah.
They literally were making it up. In 2004, like Ben Cohen, he'd got done for double movement, which was never a double movement. The dead ball line, Will Greenwood and Josh Lucy missed it by about an inch to score. Like, every game that you play, even 2018, the Grand Slam, 9 points in it, but it's always tough. One of the main things is England a bit like France, have a card that they can play that most countries can't play. Is they just have strength and depth, and they have size. They have a reputation for being a big physical team, powerful team, and they have 12 teams playing, and they can pick players just purely on their size and on form, which we don't have the luxury of. So it is always, and 75% in favour of the home team. So listen, it is always a slog going there.
How do the English rate Ireland at the moment, Andy? I know Eddie Jones came out and said that Ireland are literally the most cohesive side in the world at the moment. Is he just being nice, playing mind games again, or does he have a point that on paper Ireland are actually a better side?
I wouldn't say Eddie Jones is ever trying to be nice to people, but I think, listen, it's all of the above. The facts are, you watch Ireland play, and they are so cohesive. The ball players that they've got in the forward pack, the shapes that they put on an attack, and it's ironic that the coaches that failed so miserably for England at the 2015 World Cup, in Andy Farrell, Stuart Lancaster as well. I know he's not with Ireland, but he's with Leinster, and Mike Catt are doing such wonderful things now with this Ireland team. So. Listen, they look cohesive. They're one of the top 3 teams in the world for me at the minute, on a par with kind of France. We saw that game a few weeks ago, and obviously you beat New Zealand in the autumn as well. So it's the age-old thing for Ireland. You always kind of peak during the World Cup period, right in the middle of it, and they certainly are doing that now. And it's kind of interesting. I think you look back. England have had the wood over Ireland over the last few years, up until last year's Six Nations, where we were, and Gordon mentioned it then about the physicality. We used to dominate Ireland physically pre sort of COVID, and then obviously the game in an empty stadium last year, Ireland absolutely took us to the cleaners. And you look at the physicality now, this Irish team, obviously Bundyaki in the centres, Van der Fleer, unbelievable in the back row, Caelan Doris as well, and Peter O'Mahony brings that. There's now... along with the second row combination, there's a lot of physicality in this Irish team that have turned the screw on England. And we're now looking at it going, you are favourites without a shadow of a doubt because of the form that you're in, the ability of that team. And we're a team that are on a new pathway. And effectively, the game in last year's Six Nations changed a lot for English rugby against Ireland, where we were completely outplayed on the day. And Eddie Jones all of a sudden flicked the switch and started picking players on form in the Premiership, giving a lot of youngsters an opportunity to try and build towards the next World Cup. And it was, a clear sign that we'd stagnated from the last World Cup. So as Ireland are developing really well as a team, we're sort of 2 years behind that, I think. And we're starting out this year as the first Six Nations together with the likes of Freddie Stewart, Marcus Smith, Harry Randall, these guys, Max Malins, Joe Marchant, not a massive amount of international experience, but come the World Cup time in 18 months, they'll have a lot more experience. And yeah, that's why I'm saying Ireland are favourites as well this weekend.
But England are a completely different beast at home. As we know, they've only lost 2 games in the Six Nations at home in the past 10 years. That was against Scotland in 2021 and Ireland, of course, in 2018. How detrimental is it to Eddie Jones that Ireland, if they lose this weekend, England?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's all about the manner of the game, right? So people are saying if we've got our 2 toughest games coming up now, obviously Ireland at home and then France away. The 2 form teams in the world, if not, definitely in the Six Nations. Now, if we lose and the performance isn't great, and Ireland come over and put 25 points on us, and then we go to France and the same thing happens, then questions will need to be seriously asked around Eddie Jones and his tenure. If we lose and it's a good game, as Gordon said earlier, it's fighting tooth and nail to get a victory in Ireland, just get over the line and beat us. Then it's all about performance in that sense. I can't see the RFU wanting to sack Eddie Jones 18 months out from a World Cup. If they were going to do it, it was last year after that Ireland game in the Six Nations, where we had our worst Six Nations ever, where we finished 5th. And let's not forget, I played for England in some pretty tough periods, Six Nations wise. So that team then last year was ripe for Eddie Jones to leave at that point, but they backed him, and I think they'll back him through to the World Cup unless we, take a couple of hidings over the next few weeks, which hopefully the Twickenham factor won't allow that to happen this Saturday.
It does feel like the selections are, even the mid tournament selections for Eddie Jones, he has an awful lot of defence in there. So it kind of feels like on one hand, he's picking players on form. He's largely forced to pick Marcus Smith through pressure and Owen Farrell's injury. But other guys that have come in now, there seems to be a bit of a get out. He has both hands to play. And kind of can ride the crest of the wave if the players do well, but can also kind of throw them out in front of the bus if he needs to at the other end of it.
Well, we're here with thanks to Chicago Town, sponsored of the takeaway and all our Six Nations coverage here on Balls.ie. And we have 2 competitions for you at home this weekend. Firstly, we have a jersey and some precious Chicago Town vouchers to give away. And we have 2 golden tickets to be won to see Ireland face Scotland in the Aviva next weekend. So be sure to head over to Chicago Town and Balls.ie Instagram pages to be in with the chance to win. The very best of luck with that. But if we get into the nitty gritty of the game now, Gordon, you mentioned Marcus Smith. He's a joy to watch, such an exciting talent. And between his kicking ability and his attacking flair, he seems to be ticking all the boxes. How impressed have you been with him?
Yeah, I think Andy will probably give you a better insight into him. He knows the trials and tribulations of being a 10. But watching him, it's just been a breath of fresh air, really. He plays the game the way the game is intended to be played today. Like the way it's an attacking based game now. Refs are rewarding teams for possession. And it's largely unstructured play, which is it forces players to be creative. And I don't think there's a more creative. Well, you know, it'd be a good conversation between him and Anton Dupont about who's more creative at the moment. So I think it just feels it's a shame, and I say this as a rugby supporter. I'm glad it's not going to transpire. But he's playing a game that feels it's designed for Owen Farrell rather than a game that's designed for him, which is a shame if you like rugby. It's great if you're Irish.
Yeah, their attack doesn't seem to be firing at the moment, Andy, despite the reliance maybe on Smith's creativity. So what do you put that down to? They only scored 2 tries in this year's Six Nations so far.
Yeah, listen, it's there's a lot of excitement and a lot of talent in this England backline, but they're playing with a straitjacket on, and it's the way Eddie Jones coaches a team. You know, it's very risk adverse rugby. You know, Marcus Smith has got all the skills, and you see the way he plays for Harlequins. You know, you saw what he did for the British and Irish Lions when he got a shot in the summer. He plays with an abandon of just wanting to excite people, excites himself. He wants to take on defenders and put other people into space. And unfortunately, under Eddie Jones at the minute, we're still playing this kicking game where we get towards the opposition 22, and we're still looking to try and tactically put pressure on through kicks and turning defenders. And I get it, right? Sometimes that option most certainly is on. If you see the fullback coming and closing the gate on the end, that kick is on. But we do it relentlessly because Eddie Jones kind of pumps that information into the players, and they're not allowed to kind of run it for themselves. And I think Marcus Smith needs to be given the absolute keys to run the attack how he sees fit, because the 10 needs to control that and feel the game on the field. And Gordon's right, his analogy is spot on in terms of the England attacking game plan and mindset is suited for an Owen Farrell kind of 10 as opposed to an exciting Marcus Smith kind of operator. So we hope that the shackles are freed this weekend, and Marcus Smith gets to, you know, bring his whole box of tricks. And I really can't wait to see the battle between him and Johnny Sexton. It's master against apprentice, you know, in terms of international experience and where they're at, but both top quality operators that could win the game for either side. So that battle's going to be really interesting. Yeah,
there's a 13-year age gap between Johnny Sexton and Marcus Smith. Do you see similarities with how they both play?
Well, I think Marcus Smith would probably suggest he's got a little bit more flair than Johnny at the minute. Johnny's obviously 36 years of age, and it amazes me, you know, how he's still playing at the top level at that age, and he's still going to go to a World Cup in 18 months' time. So he's a phenomenal athlete in terms of the way he looks after himself. You know, he takes the ball to the line. We know he likes a bit of physical confrontation. He will get hit, but Marcus Smith is more sort of off the cuff as a 10. He'll look to drift across the field, get his goose step out, try and suck a defender into his channel and then put someone through a hole, or even go and beat that defender himself, which Johnny plays in a very different way, systematic way, that he takes the ball to the line. He's obviously got all his option runners around him, and they play balls out the back a bit more. But, you know, very different players, but both high quality operators.
How will Ireland look to put Smith under pressure this weekend, Gordon? Where will they target him?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the way Ireland were playing is they've been playing a high possession based game with territory in the opposition's half and scoreboard pressure. So they like to play off I think Paula Collin was calling it lightning quick rucks, so less than 3 second rucks. And for for two of the games and for one half of the French game, they got that absolutely right. And that's sometimes the best defense is attack. And Ireland, the best way to put Marcus Smith under pressure is give him possession he doesn't really want in his own quarter or third of the field, and make him earn the right to find those holes and create those holes, because it is much harder to do that 20-30 meters out from your own try line, and that's the way Ireland play. They like to get this quick tempo ruck. You can see most of their attack is coming off the line out. There will be a big emphasis on the line out. You see the picked Courtney Laws in at 6, so they and the big question around, will England try to go up and try to disrupt Irish line out? Now, the trade-off with that is, if they're successful, they will really hurt the Irish attack system. If they don't, and Ireland get good quality ball, they have 3 players out of the defensive line, and Ireland will look to exploit them at a later time. So I think that's like Ireland are they know they will have to defend, but their whole game plan is built on trying to dominate possession, 55 to 60% possession. Rucks, if they can get 50 to 60% of their rucks around that less than 3 second mark, they're going to be pretty hard to stop.
Well, the worrying thing is, each time in the past that Ireland have come up under pressure and up against teams in the physical stakes, that they've lost the collisions and then they've lost the game. So how do we outsmart England in that regard?
Well, I think it's not necessarily that we lose the physical stakes. So if you look at the first half in the French game, so we had 8 lineouts and we didn't win. We only won 1 lineout, and that wasn't clean. So what that means is our attacking platform is changed, and we're moving to slower rucks, which we then have to try and physically get over the gain line, which we're not really designed for. I know Andy's talking about there is a level of physicality in this team, and there is, but I think that is, a very, very, that's not us at our best. And if we have to go into that, it's going to be a long afternoon, because one of the things the English won't do is they won't tire in the same way that the French did in the last 30 minutes. So for Ireland, it is all about accuracy and avoiding that physicality, because if we can be accurate at the set piece time and get over the gain line, then it kind of becomes a very virtuous circle, and we kind of feed into itself. If the accuracy at the breakdown, at the set piece, isn't there, then it becomes, to me, then it really shifts in England's favour.
Will England look to target Ireland at set piece, Andy? Like Gordon alluded to there, they have Máire Treasa leading the English charge. How do you see that playing out? Yeah,
it's definitely something that we need to get right from ourselves, from our own attacking standpoint, but also going after Ireland at set piece. If you affect them at source, which we all know how they attack off line outs, and their attacking structures around that, and it is, as Gordon just said, getting over the gain line and then getting lightning quick ball off it. If you disrupt at set piece level, where we've got Courtney Laws to go up in the line outs, we've got 3 line out options to disrupt Ireland. Scrum time is going to be huge as well. I know Ellis Genge and Carl Sinclair will really back themselves, although Tyg Furlong is the best tighter prop in the world without a shadow of a doubt. Interestingly, obviously, with Kelleher and Andrew Porter being out injured, I think that does play into England's hand a little bit. Obviously, Cian Healy comes in, and Sheehan as well, who are both quality operators, but I just think England might have a little bit too much power at scrum time. But for me, it's all about the launch plays off attacking the lineouts, and if we can disrupt them there, and we can put them off their game in terms of their strike runners and their systematic plays, where everyone knows where they're going from that first phase onto the second phase, and with that lightning quick ball, it's very difficult to stop. So you affect them at source, and then hopefully you can get on top of them physically from there.
Ireland showed against France, Gordon, although they conceded early, they were able to fight their way back into the game. But how important is it to get a strong start in Twickenham?
Listen, it's like the English crowd are, that's going to be a 85%, 85% English, probably 5%.
Do you think? I was going to say there's more Irish living in England than there is English, probably.
Hey, well, I think it's just hard. It's hard to get tickets, but it always feels like it's full English support. A big thing is silencing the crowd. While they can not turn, but they can become a hostile crowd to the home team if you really start to turn the screw on England. So, it's you've got to win the momentum battle as well. And that's probably something I think where, you talk about when I mentioned the experience gap with Joey Carberry, that's the bit that Sexton brings today, and that's so valuable in Twickenham. How you manage the momentum in the game. So it's not always on to attack. Sometimes you have to put the kick to 50-22. You have to play the tactical battle. You have to keep your forwards on the front foot. You've got to manage your resources. You've got to, because you have a finite amount of energy to dispel. You just have to manage that thing. And that's, when you look on balance, you say, where is there clear advantages? Over the balance of 80 minutes, someone like Sexton in a game like this brings huge value to them. And I think if you can silence that crowd, you can build pressure, and then you have all those other things we talked about, the possession, the territory. It will eventually, we know this team can score tries, so but you've got to earn that right. And how it all unfolds is going to be hugely exciting, because it literally is, two teams, England going to England's opportunity to, do they try and just attack? It hasn't been going well for them. A sane man would say England are going to try and disrupt Ireland, and then can Ireland not be disrupted? So it's whoever is more accurate, and whoever does better will most likely win the game.
Do Ireland have another gear in them, Gordon? Have we yet to see a full, complete performance from this side?
Well, I think we've seen a couple of pretty close. We've seen a couple of really, really high quality performances. I think the challenge for this group is now every game you progress with these type of performances, the margins get smaller and finer and smaller, because you become marked, and people will up their game to play against you. And this isn't Ireland coming to England and us off the back of 3 games, and England's form. This is a very, very well-oiled Irish machine coming, and that heightens the English response. So the question for Ireland is, can they continually up the ante because every game you play, every game you win, you get, oddly and paradoxically, you get closer to a loss. So it'd be really, really interesting for Ireland how they manage that.
From an English perspective, Andy, if not a win, what do you want to see from Eddie Jones's side this weekend when it comes to performance?
Yeah, I think we all talk about our attacking game, and it's been pretty blunt at times, sort of over kicking in the opposition half. When there's sort of 5v3s on the edge where you can take yards and get quicker ball. So we need to see a development of our attack. We need to see Marcus Smith really give him the opportunity to lead the team and play his game in an England jersey that he does in a Harlequins jersey. So there's no point in picking Harry Randall at 9 and Marcus Smith at 10, and the likes of Joe Marchant at 13 and Freddie Stewart, these sort of guys who are exciting guys that want ball in hand and then playing a kicking game. You have to, don't get me wrong, you need a kicking game within your structure of getting out your own half and trying to put pressure on Ireland. But also you need these guys to be able to light up the stadium and play the way they play at their at club level, with the excitement, the speed, the tenacity, and everything that comes with wanting to play front football. So if we lose to Ireland at the weekend, and I do believe that Ireland are favourites, if we have a good performance where we can see an advancement in our attacking game, that will stand us in good stead. Because the other thing that Eddie Jones has mentioned a few times is this is a semi-final for us. In terms of the Six Nations, we lost to Scotland in round 1, which meant we had to then win every other game to try and win the championship. And this is semi-final stage. Whoever loses this weekend can't win the Six Nations. And I'm probably predicting that Ireland are going to win, and then all the Irish will turn into England fans next weekend when we go to France. So you've got a chance of winning it. So that's the way I can make friends in Ireland this weekend.
So you're predicting an Irish win, Andy, and will it be a close fixture? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, listen, if Ireland get to anywhere near the levels they were at against New Zealand or Wales earlier in the Six Nations, parts of that French game, I think it's going to be a tough afternoon for England. I think Ireland are favourites, probably 6-point favourites for me. But then you always bring it back to the record and how successful England have been at Twickenham in the Six Nations over recent history. Gordon said it himself. He's won there a few times, but it's always really close, and how hard it is to beat England on their own patch. So it's going to be a close one, I think. But I just think Ireland have got a little bit too much. They're a little bit further down the track in terms of their cohesion and their attacking game has come on leaps and bounds. So yeah, probably back in Ireland by 6 points.
Gordon, are you confident of an Ireland win?
You know, it's really hard. You kind of know the week of a game when you're inside the environment, you're inside the team. You know, you kind of have that little kind of sense. You just don't have that when you're watching from the outside in. You know, there's a couple of unknown quantities with the English team, a lot of new faces. We don't know how they really react under pressure because we haven't seen them together yet. So I think that's something Ireland need to exploit, the kind of inexperience in a lot of this English team. If they can do that, if they can maintain, they get a little bit of rub at the green. If they can maintain pressure, if they don't get too many injuries, yeah, I think it is possible. And I agree with Andy. It's it's a 5 to 6 point game either way. But I kind of get the feeling where Ireland are with the kind of with the evolution of the team and their attacking shape, and yeah, just where they are. I think there's less pressure on them. And as I said, we get to see how England react to the pressure that they're under. But there's a bit of there's a bit of scrutiny under this English team to go, well, where are they going? This is a kind of make or break game for them. So listen, one of the two teams is going to play that to their advantage. I'm kind of very optimistic that Sexton can make that into an advantage for him. So yeah, I agree with Andy. Kind of a 5-6 point game.
Okay. Thanks very much, Andy Goode and Gordon Darcy. That's all we have time for today. A tight, nervy affair awaits us in Twickenham, and the lads are confident of an Irish win. We are here, of course, on the takeaway, but sponsored by Chicago Town Pizza. So be sure to get your Chicago Town Pizza in before the big game. We'll be back on the takeaway next weekend. Until then, from all of us here, Slán go fóill.